Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in Nerdy Talk do not represent those of Anime Herald. Due to strong language, listener discretion is advised. Now sit back and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Nerdy Talk. I'm Mike Ferrer, being joined by Matt Brown and Ben Fennell, and better known as Butts McGee.
That's right.
And as you know, this past week was the E3 Expo, which is pretty much the biggest event in gaming for the year outside of, well, period. The only thing that would be close is TGS, which comes later this year. Anyway.
Since Expo is part of the name, wouldn't it be the E2 Expo?
Yes, but...
That's just like that bit on Delocated where John wanted to call his line of jeans JJ Jeans and to have it mean John's Jeans.
Yeah, but it's kind of become an accepted term nowadays, kind of like people that say ATM machine.
There are people who get murdered for that.
Yes, there are. But anyway, during the week we saw a lot of big news come through. All the industry gave out their best, their brightest, their most flashy presentations. So I kind of want to just take about an hour, talk to everyone, see what you guys thought of the show itself, and find out what your picks and what your biggest surprise of the evening are. So I guess we'll start by saying, who do you think had the best showing this year?
Well, I guess I'll go first, but yeah, I think it's kind of a no contest here in Nintendo's case, since the other two just sort of treated E3 like it's more or less the same thing it's always been when we've been watching the trade show itself decline for quite a few years, where the other two just sort of had their usual suits, stand up on stage, make awkward jokes about passion for gaming and graphics and all of that, and basically showed more of the same. We had Nintendo basically go all out from the digital events with their Robot Chicken bits and that wonderful Iwata and Reggie battle. They had to open things with the Smash Me character reveal, and then they had, the 21 hours of Treehouse live streaming, multiple new IPs, lots of ladies in their games and their staff to appreciate as well in terms of representing a wider swath of gamers rather than a white guys with guns that dominated Sony and Microsoft scene. And they also had plenty of new IPs, some major exclusive pickups, and a good swath of games going from covering, I guess, your most E-rated markets to, even your M-rated games, from Bayonetta with 1 now coming on the disc for the second game. And, of course, Devil's Third, too, and Rescue for that was pretty nice as well.
And didn't Bayonetta also get, the first Bayonetta get a port for the Wii U?
Yes, it is, on the same disc, like I was saying. And, of course, they're also enhancing that and adding new content like the Nintendo character costumes and things like that as well, so...
Yeah, which was fantastic. If I remember correctly, there are 3 costumes. There's, Link, Princess Peach, and Samus. Link, you get the Master Sword and the Highland Shield, and the enemies drop rupees instead of halos.
Exactly.
And Princess Peach, instead of summoning the devils, she summons Bowser.
Indeed. And then, of course, we saw some other amazing moments, too, like in the footage we got of Hyrule Warriors with new attacks, including dragging the Majora's Mask moon down to the Earth itself to crash into the enemies and things like that. They really just sort of overdid it with the spectacle in a great way.
Oh yeah, not to mention the fact that we got our first glimpse of Minna as a playable character, too.
Exactly, and yeah, the footage of her in the Treehouse live stream was wonderful as well and looked great.
It really was. I mean, it was almost an overload at times. What was it, 20-something hours of just pure streaming goodness the whole week?
Yeah, roughly 21 hours in total now.
And it seemed like very little of it was scripted outside the questions.
Indeed, yeah. You had the occasional appearances by some of the execs and the industry professionals and all of that, but so much of it was just the Treehouse staff, pretty much just hanging out and having fun while discussing the games and showing them off to the viewers and making all those jokes among themselves. And I mean, hell, the fact that a dead grandma joke came up at one point that everybody else kept echoing afterward because it hit so hard was amazing in itself.
It really was. It's the type of stuff that you never thought you'd see come from Nintendo of all companies.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, they just basically stopped worrying so much about having those horribly stilted, stiff, scripted messages like everyone else had. We saw their executives relatively briefly compared to usual, and we mostly spent the time seeing them either narrate things or watching them fight each other with lots of CGI just to make us laugh, or otherwise participating in like comedy sketches and such. But otherwise, it was just their staff showing essentially how in touch they are with the industry and the market in the first place, and that they are basically just ordinary nerds who absolutely love their jobs and they have great senses of humor. And I mean, these were people who weren't even really prepped to be on camera in the first place, given the work that Treehouse does in the first place. And they were just very naturally funny too.
The one thing I seen to shock me though was out of all of the entire event, it seemed like Miyamoto's two quote unquote secret projects. What was it? Project God and Project Giant Robot.
Yep, those were the two.
They they really didn't seem to have as much of an impact as some of the stuff that was revealed otherwise. Like
Yeah, I think.
they were incredibly low key.
Yeah, you were expecting people to sort of make a big deal out of those, and I guess people were expecting him to have games that were further along. But every time anybody thinks about Nintendo new IPs, they think of something that looks like an alternate version of Mario or Zelda, and something that sort of fits right in there and magically changes the world while at the same time comfortably being more of the same. That would inevitably elicit reactions of why not just make the other IP instead?
That is
Kind of like
true.
Yeah, kind of like the reactions we saw to Codename Steam, which is fantastic, but everybody had ginned themselves up so much for a Majora's Mask remake that they'll probably eventually get that they wanted to be angry at that then and there when it's a fantastic looking new IP.
Yeah, it looks like a steampunk version of Valkyria Chronicles.
Exactly, like a cross between that and XCOM, that sort of overall style of turn-based shooting strategy RPG goodness. And I mean, you have those sort of four-character squads you'll control, so you want to try to keep your characters alive and spend a lot of time, like in XCOM, sort of setting up and priming your characters so that you don't use all of their action points per turn, so they'll be ready to fire on any aliens that come into view and things like that on their turn. And it's the kind of
Absolutely.
experience we've never really seen on the 3DS before, or a portable, really.
Absolutely.
The diversity of that game has been pointed out too, since in contrast to where you have Ubisoft talking about how hard it is to animate women, you have Codename Steam, where you've got a woman, a black guy, and a lion in the playable cast revealed right out the door, and that's not even the whole cast either.
That really created a bit of a shitstorm over the internet too when Ubisoft came out and said, what was it? Female characters are too hard to animate.
Yeah, essentially that, and that after they had promised to bring more female characters into Assassin's Creed, when those always seem to just be about a generic-coded white guy stabs people.
Wait, a black guy? Oh, he's the Tin Man. I get it.
Zing?
Zing.
Well,
Yes.
you said a girl, a black guy, and a lion.
Yes, that was Codename Steam.
Hmm. Yeah, the other two players, Sony and Microsoft had showings as well, but I don't recall them having as big of a positive reaction in
Yeah.
general.
Well, they were sort of over-promising last year. Sony kept talking about how the PS4 was going to be the PS2 all over again, when its library is shaping up to essentially be nothing more than a slightly prettier PS3 with no new experiences, no new ideas, and what little they're getting in the way of new IPs look even more half-assed than their average in-house PS3 game in the first place. And basically all of the IPs and games they were showing here were pretty much just more of last generation made to look slightly nicer and promises of more of that we'd be seeing maybe in 3 to 4 years in many cases.
Like, I mean, some of their stuff did show promise. Like, Bloodborne looked cool, but it's one of those things where we only got a concept trailer, and even then, the trailer didn't run that nicely. If I remember correctly, it was kind of juddery and stuttery.
Yeah, and From Software has been having a number of issues with sales too, since the whole Souls series bubble seems to be beginning to burst a bit on them, and
Mm,
they've never really been a company that's been able to move hardware like Sony needs in the first place. So it seems more like they'd be better off
right.
continuing to focus on this burgeoning PC crowd that they've been developing the past few years than anything else.
Well, the problem with From Software is that they don't move hardware, period. I mean, honestly, that's supposed to be the job of the first party. And what we've seen from Sony, Uncharted looks like it will definitely move some units. Because Uncharted, I'm not a big fan, but it is a popular series.
Yeah, they're all the
And,
same. This is a remake of the first game. The fourth game is barely into development at this point and won't be coming
well,
anytime soon.
well, the trailer they showed at E3 was actually for the fourth game.
Oh, was it? Well,
Yeah. It was
interesting to
set.
see how they paced that then, given that we'd heard, I guess not even all that long ago, that next to nobody was actually actively working on it.
Mhm. They might have diverted the staff from the remake of the first into the fourth game to kind of kickstart it along while they hire new
Mm.
staff.
Well, if
Yeah,
they announce it at E3, then they have like a whole year before they even need to set a release date, so it's fine.
True.
yeah, and of course we're used to Sony and Microsoft taking usually often anywhere from 2 to 4 years to release anything they show at E3. But I have to
True.
immediately feel like it's a little suspect to talk about Sony hiring staff because that's the opposite of what we've been seeing them doing for months now too. We're watching them bleed right now, and we've
True.
watched Naughty Dog lose a ton of staff left and right too. And of course, we really did see a lot of how troubled the industry is right now, reflected in Sony and Microsoft showings at E3 this year too. They were sort of expected to have this really wide, massive swath of support from all across third parties all over the world, and instead, they mostly had Ubisoft, EA, and some Activision stuff there aside from their first party releases. Few exclusives. I mean, they were trying to hype up timed indie exclusives that
Mm.
will eventually hit the PC and all over elsewhere too.
You,
And ultimately, the industry itself isn't really coming together for these systems, and they have more ports and I guess remakes than anything else coming right now too.
you know you have a problem when your biggest reaction came from a remake of Grim Fandango.
Exactly. And even then, that's coming to the PC now, too. And it was a huge collective sigh of relief on the internet when that news came out. Because nobody was
Hmm.
going to buy a damn Sony system for Grim Fandango.
No, I
Yeah,
mean,
for 5 minutes it sounded like it was going to be an exclusive, but
then like right after
Yeah.
Tim Schafer came out and said it was on the PC.
Yep. He knows his market right there, so.
Yep.
And of course, on the note of Schaefer and Double Fine, too, we have Costume Quest coming out this fall to look forward to, too, which is getting a Wii U release, among others, on pretty much every platform, too. And that should be a lot of fun.
Definitely.
Yeah, the original was
Um,
just a labor of love, so.
yeah, Microsoft had a couple of interesting properties actually. Like Sunset Overdrive looks really cool,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
the visual style and use of color in that and the humor are refreshing, but though at the same time, the gameplay really doesn't do anything for me because it's another Insomniac shooter, basically.
true. And otherwise, they have what a game from Suda 51 if I remember correctly, or was that Sony?
That was Sony, and it looks
Yeah.
more like a Western game than anything remotely Japanese, too. And it's kind of amazing to see them invest in him when he's essentially burned down every company he's worked with now, too.
When you get burned enough, there's only the only place you can go is people with the deep pockets.
Yeah, and of course, as we know, Sony's aren't exactly deep anymore either. So it kind of
Mm,
speaks like they don't really know what they're doing with what money they still have anymore at this point if they seriously think he's going to help them move systems. I mean, it's like Microsoft's investment in Swery65 last year, who wasn't even present at E3 this time. And even he's essentially making a Western follow up to Kenji Ino's D series. On the
mm,
platform, of course, that Kenji Ino would never have wanted his work to ever be on in the first place.
true, which is kind of funny because
Yeah.
well, it could be worse. Could have been no, it couldn't be worse actually because he was a Kenji Ino is a very strange man.
Yeah, that's basically just them dumping on his grave right there. And it is weird seeing these supposed big Japanese exclusives that they've begun to fund at Sony and Microsoft now, as few of those as they're getting,
Mm,
looks very deliberately Western developed and not at all Japanese or anything like that either now. It's just like they think if they attach a vaguely familiar Japanese name to something developed by a Western team, they'll manage to, move units. But then, of course, this is also the same Microsoft that decided bringing Phantom Dust back was a good idea at E3 this year.
that is true. I mean, that one gave I think a lot of people a collective what the hell is going on.
Exactly. It's like they
So,
think there's no nostalgia for franchises and games that there isn't.
and Microsoft also announced a new Crackdown, didn't they?
I believe so, yeah.
That could be fun because the first Crackdown was just big, it was stupid, it was fun.
I've heard this new one is apparently going to rely very heavily on the cloud, too, which kind of makes me
Ew.
raise some questions about the tech they're trying to integrate, too, given how
Mm.
iffy so much cloud tech has been for things like gaming so far.
Yeah, I mean, if honestly, I've worked with Azure and it's a very capable system. I mean, so if handled right, it could be something cool, but keywords are if handled right.
Yeah, that's something that just remains to be seen, really.
Yeah. Plus, Kamiya had his a new game coming out for the Xbox. Scalebound. It looks like, which we didn't get any gameplay on, which sounds like
Yes, kind of like either Dragon's Dogma or near Drakengard type game, but with I guess wasn't it like Dr. Dre in the trailer too?
something like that.
Yeah, that was kind of confusing there too, though. It's inevitably not going to make any money either, looking at Platinum's work with those. But I'm sure whatever it is, it'll probably still be fun when it's released. Won't do anything for the hardware, but
Yeah,
it's make for some fun LPs to watch in the future, if nothing else.
definitely. Yeah, and then we get to Nintendo, who just they came out swinging. Like they came out with there wasn't a single Mario game which everyone was cheering about this year. Like not a
I guess
single
the one Mario
Mario.
thing they did have was the one people wanted in Mario Maker, actually.
Yeah, but that's pretty much the evolution of Mario Paint, which looks really cool.
Exactly, exactly. And yeah, and then of course we have that Zelda that people were pretty much dreaming of for ages, fully open world there, sort of Elder
Mm.
Scrolls-esque in scale there.
And it's just gorgeous.
Exactly. And of course all of the footage we saw of that was in-engine, so
Mm. Plus, we got a good hard look at Monolith Studios' new game, Xenoblade X.
that's right. That's going to be incredible too. And of course the most important thing is the fact that they confirmed that Nopon are back and that no matter what, you can't escape Nopon.
That is true. And Hero Pone will be the best no Pone.
Exactly. There had better be a new hero opponent in there somewhere.
As if they could avoid it.
That's right. I would put good money on that the one we saw will probably have a major role in the story somewhere and possibly be a party member because I can't see them having another Xeno game without a Nopon party member in there somewhere and a Nopon robot, of course.
Oh, definitely.
Even the first game, it goes out of its way to encourage you to use the Nopone character, even though
Yeah,
you
but-
really don't want to. At least
He's
most people don't. I really,
he's a-
well, I didn't. Whatever.
I put him in as soon as I got him.
there's,
He was a hero opponent. What was I supposed to do?
There's a particular fight in Xenoblade, a boss fight, which is if you do not use the Nopone character, it is significantly harder.
He has a lot of really good abilities. It's like they decided, oh yeah, we can take mascot characters, but make them not suck.
Plus, he's an absolute tank. Doesn't he have, like, the highest HP and defense of any character in the game?
Well, that's just the thing. He's a tank and he's a magic user, and there's a particular fight where pretty much only magic is effective.
Exactly.
And
So he's like
there
this,
just happen to be 3 magic user characters.
He's a cute little fuzzball who happens to also be a total beast. And of course, they even pretty much make you use him in that one dragon fight not long after he first joins you too, when you have to go out into that jungle full of those giant dinosaurs that will kill you immediately if you get into fights with them.
Oh man.
Oh god, that part sucked.
That's one of the things that I actually loved about that game. There were hard there were regular monsters that were really difficult, and you could find them in just about any area.
Immovable Gonzalez.
That's right. You can't have this discussion without mentioning immovable consoles.
He
I
better be in a new game.
I moved
right.
Gonzalez. That is my greatest accomplishment in that game.
Yeah, I still gotta do that yet myself. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the monkeys back in this one too, given that
Oh yeah.
in addition to the freaky monsters they showed in the live stream on Treehouse and all too, we did see some familiar Earth-style creatures too, like wild boar enemies that will mostly ignore you until you pick a fight with them and things like that.
Yeah, they don't aggro you right away, which is cool.
Exactly, and I like the structure of the game too, where we have this sort of big, gigantic, sort of open-world city for the game's hub, sort of like something out of a game like Yakuza and the Neo Los Angeles. So you have one really gigantic city that you're building up and working on over the course of the game, but then the rest of the game is going out into the wilderness and exploring this entire Earth-like planet that you have too.
Definitely.
That whole scale looks incredible, and I mean, it looks like the entirety of the game is even larger scale and even more interconnected than Xenoblade was too, where you just got those sort of absolutely massive regions that you could spend hours exploring and fully mapping out and finding side quests in and things like that.
If there was
Just enhances it and takes it to the next level.
if there was any problem with Xenoblade, is that there were too many things to do.
Yep.
I mean,
I had
There
to use
are-
a guide because there were just so many quests that you could
That
miss.
was
with
just
so
a
many
long
characters.
oh yeah, but that's a good thing though. I mean, it's a game that really gives a lot of value for its buck.
I never felt like there was too many things to do. I felt like there were there were too many things that I had to do though to move on. The especially toward the end, the bosses are at a high enough level that if you didn't do a pretty large number of side quests, you would have some real difficulty.
I probably spent more time in the original doing more side quests than the main quest at this point now, and just roaming and mapping stuff out too. And it's because there's so much joy in that in the game too, which is something I've missed and haven't really felt a whole lot since maybe the Super NES era in many respects.
And that's another thing where it kind of the game is kind to you in a sense if you are adventurous. If you go and map out the areas and find everything there is to find, then a lot of the times the side quests will essentially resolve themselves. You know, the moment that you find that there's a quest to do, you've already finished it.
Exactly, you'll have the items or anything like that.
True.
And I liked how the way the game sort of rewarded your overall just exploration in general, and gave you that constant rewarding sense of discovery. And kind of like how in Skies of Arcadia you were encouraged to find those little discoveries hidden all over the world, whereas Xenoblade gives us these landmarks that are always interesting everywhere you go.
The only thing I really have to say is screw whoever decided that having that giant sea that you had to swim through, which would take 8 to 10 hours to fully map.
That was one of the last things I actually did before I took my last break. And when I finally get my Wii U this summer, I'm looking forward to finally getting back to it and entering the city there, Alchemoth. But yeah,
that had its challenges. There was also a thing where there was a couple things you had to do in that area where there were you had to wait for certain weather effects, which was not unusual in the game. I mean, there's a lot of other quests that depend on certain times of day or certain weather. But
dragons too.
But if when it came down to it, you had to wait for the weather effect, and then you had to jump in the water and spend like 5 minutes swimming to the place where you would fight the thing that only showed up during this weather effect. And half the time, the weather effect would go away before you got there.
And then a dragon shows up and kills you. Whoops. And they've actually confirmed that weather and day and night cycles are going to influence the world and behavior even more in Xenoblade Chronicles X too as well. So there's going to be even more varied monster behavior depending on day and night and weather conditions and things like that. So there'll be certain predators that'll come out at night and attack more aggressively then, while you'll see other monsters just sort of sleeping in packs that you can completely ignore and sneak right past without them reacting and things like that, just varying from different times of day. And of course they've actually shown in the new trailers too, after people worried that it was going to be a little bit more sort of brown and gray compared to Xenoblade. The original, that is, there's a lot of areas that do look just as gorgeous and well designed as the original, and they're just, even though they didn't focus on it quite as much in the early trailers, they are just as focused on those just absolutely breathtaking vistas and skyboxes as the original game was too.
Most gorgeous water in a game yet.
Exactly. Oh man. And of course just getting to eventually explore that whole world with your robots too, flying through the damn skies over areas you would probably inevitably spent 10, 15, 20 hours mapping out on foot before is going to be incredible too.
Absolutely. I mean, this is going to be a game that consumes you, which
Exactly.
I'm looking forward to.
There's a unique mix of melee and ranged combat that you can switch between too, which makes me think a little bit of the older Persona games where you'd be switching between your guns and your sword attacks too. And this one actually has a ton of classes per individual character too, so you'll have tons of different jobs essentially, like in Final Fantasy or Bravely Default, to switch between that are unique to each character with different skill sets to unlock, and you can apparently switch classes on the fly in battle too. So it makes me think a little bit of the role switching they had in things like Final Fantasy 13 that you can do right in the middle of battle, except instead of simply saying have this character fight and this person be the healer, it's everybody has a complex set of abilities that you can set at any given time and then change on the fly for a much deeper and more strategic battle experience, where Final Fantasy 13 was more look at these cool animations and occasionally push a button to change strategy in case the numbers get too low.
Isn't that what RPGs are about?
Speaking of Final Fantasy 13, this year is the year of the port, it seems, because we got confirmations of HG remakes of The Last of Us, Halo 1 through 4. Sleeping Dogs was recently done, wasn't it? Like recently announced, I think.
Yeah, just in the past 24 hours now.
And there's also a rumored Lightning collection for Final Fantasy 13, which collects all three games in the series. So
Exactly.
you could hate yourself all over again because unfortunately there are very few people that enjoy those games for good reason.
Yep. So all these companies are just basically hurting themselves even more with this stuff after, and then the fanboys are scrambling to react to this after years of mocking Nintendo for using ports and remakes on their systems at all, when they've never relied on them to the degree we're seeing the PS4 and Xbox One do that right now. And on top of that, people were mad at Nintendo for not having enough ports and remakes at E3, when all they have now this year were the Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire remakes for the 3DS later this year, which they gave minimal attention to. And even then, those games are well over 10 years old now, too.
I'm not sure how much attention the original The Last of Us got, but it really is a terrific game, and if more people get a chance to play it with this remake, then I think that's fantastic.
It's essentially a smaller version of the same market that already had access to it on the PS2, on PS3 rather, actually. So.
And it sold, however, it did sell very well on the PS3.
Yeah, well, it was Naughty Dog's latest sort of game made to win awards, basically.
That is true, but
This time with fungus zombies.
it's. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested.
Yeah, I haven't been interested in anything Naughty Dog has done myself, pretty much since the PS2 era, and even then they went downhill after the first Jak and Daxter.
And then about Final Fantasy 13, I would say, I would actually say that I didn't. I felt disappointed by the first game in the sense that you could tell that there were a lot of corners cut.
Pretty corridors.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Almost the whole game was a corridor, but then toward the end, it's almost like, I don't know if it's Stockholm syndrome, but
Could have been.
toward the end, it's the world opens up and there's like this, this just fairly gigantic area, and you get to hunt monsters, and it progressively gets harder.
The
And
player just
I
gets
sort of like that part.
We're like, hey, why couldn't this have been the whole game? Sob, sob, sob.
Yeah, pretty much is how I felt about it.
Yeah, it's pretty much the Square effect these days.
So,
I
Guess
guess
that is-
Motomo Toriyama too, or something like that, who I guess has become one of the most reviled RPG directors thanks to that trilogy of games.
well, yeah, I pretty much blame Nomura for everything that's gone wrong with Final Fantasy.
Belts and zippers and earrings on everybody.
Speaking of Final Fantasy versus 13, I mean 15 was a no-show this year, wasn't it?
Yep. Pretty much all of the really big games that people were expecting Sony to have this year didn't really show up. There's no word of The Last Guardian, which is increasingly looking like vaporware. And there was nothing Japanese from Square, even though they did now. I guess aside from the fact that they're bringing ports of Type 0 to, I guess, the Xbox Sony system. I believe maybe PS4 and Xbox One. I forget. It might be PS3 and 360 aside from the Vita, but they're doing it too late to be relevant. And then, of course, they announced a new 3DS game over in Japan that was unrelated to the E3 showings themselves. It just happened to reveal at the time in this Monster Hunter sort of meets Crystal Chronicles style RPG, Final Fantasy Explorers, which they've also already revealed is going to be filled with job system gameplay as well. So.
Mm.
And that already looks pretty much better than any of Square's actual showings at E3. Though, of course, they've got the new Theater Rhythm coming out fairly soon, too, in the next couple of months.
Yes, that is the one thing that I care about.
Curtain Call, over 100 new songs.
That's right. I still need to get the original, too, and I'm really
Yep.
psyched myself for the localization of Fantasy Life after we waited for years for that.
From what I understand, don't bother with the original. All the original songs are in Curtain Call.
Okay, great. So I'll also skip the original for Curtain Call then, and I will look forward to
Right.
buying the shit out of Fantasy Life and enjoying
Unless you
its
just can't wait.
Uematsu soundtrack and that. Yeah, of course, I'm sure the original is probably fairly cheap by now, too.
Theater Rhythm is possibly the greatest game ever made.
I did enjoy the demo when I played that a couple of years back. That's just one I need to catch up on. And of course, as always, it always bears saying that obviously, since Square would like to pretend that franchise doesn't exist anymore in the West, the sooner Nintendo is able to bring more Dragon Quest games over here, the better.
Definitely. That's the one thing I was hoping to see that I really didn't was Dragon Quest VII.
Exactly. And that was a disappointment, but there's still a good chance we'll see that yet. And Fantasy Life is a big story in itself because it continues to show that Nintendo seems to be finally stepping in more and more with Level 5, where for some reason no other third party would localize their games, even though they were all essentially just money waiting to be made on the 3DS there, since they were too busy throwing their money away on Sony systems and pretending the Vita was something that they could even afford to localize for in the first place. And then in Fantasy Life's case, the game's been out for quite a while in Japan now, almost 2 years at this point. Fantasy Life Link, of course, the version that we're getting with additional online co-op play and things like that, that came out late last year, was sort of a glimmer of hope for release here. But after all this time, we're finally seeing that game come west, and that's a pretty damn good feeling, considering that it's developed by so many of these former Seiken Densetsu slash Secret of Mana series developers from Brownie Brown, which of course is now One Up Studio, and of course has Nobuo Uematsu behind the soundtrack, and looks like a great sort of mixture of sort of life simulation and just really engrossing whimsical RPG.
Absolutely, and it's kind of funny because I remember so many people getting so like negative, saying it's not going to happen. But during that Treehouse stream, they said it was what the equivalent of a 20,000 page novel, something like that, to translate.
Exactly. So it's incredible that they've done that, and knowing Treehouse and the kind of quality of work they've been doing in the first place, even as evidenced by their very recent release of Tomodachi Life, which is hilarious, they've undoubtedly done an amazing job with that too. And Fantasy Life is going to easily be one of the best games of this year. I'm just looking forward.
Definitely. By the way, did you see the Smash Brothers tournament?
I did not catch any of the tournament, unfortunately.
I mean, if there was one moment you should catch it, even on YouTube. It's the moment where they first catch Mega Man's Final Smash. You should just see the crowd go absolutely nuts.
I heard
It's
that
like
happened.
it's like
Is the tournament online, by the way? Is it available for
um
streaming now?
yes, it is. There'll be a link in the show notes.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
Yeah, I mean, they just went mad. Like, people were screaming. The announcers were just going absolutely batshit. I mean, the reaction in some ways sounded like a toilet flushing because you could realize how much money Capcom flushed away by not really taking care of this franchise.
Exactly. That would have been a moment right there, too, for Nintendo to casually say, oh, by the way, we're saving Mega Man Legends 3. Because they could still do it. They've still got the code over there at Capcom, and with the right money and the right people being assigned to it, that game could come back and be amazing yet, too.
Absolutely.
It'll be interesting to see just what becomes of Capcom too, given just how little presence they really had at E3 this year, and the fact that their Sony and Microsoft support has more or less disappeared at this point now too, because they're so close to bankruptcy. But they're very close with Nintendo now, and it was like their biggest announcements of E3 were more Nintendo 3DS and Wii U eShop support. And I mean, I'm thrilled about that too, because I mean, it means a hell of a lot of classic games we didn't even see on the Wii Virtual Console are finally hitting, you know, stuff like Gargoyle's Quest 2 and Demon's Crest and basically every Mega Man game that ever hit a Nintendo system, and that's incredible in itself.
That is fantastic. I'll be looking forward to getting the Demon's Crest stuff just because, well, they're fantastic if difficult games.
Exactly. I played the original Gargoyle's Quest as a kid on the Game Boy. Beat that again as one of my very first 3DS Virtual Console games years ago, and that game is brutally hard. And as an adult, I find myself having to embarrassingly use restore points a lot, where I could actually beat it all in one go as a kid, which makes me look back and think, wow, what kind of kid was I? Because that game was so freaking hard, but it was fantastic. I never finished Gargoyle's Quest 2 on the NES, though I had it, and I sadly never got a copy of Demon's Crest, nor did I have Mega Man 7 or any of that either, so I'm really psyched for those to hit the Super NES Virtual Console on the Wii U.
I had Mega Man 7 in that collection release on the PS2 a few years back, and it really was not that good. You could really tell that it was going downhill at that point. Just like after a certain point, you could kind of see it with Mega Man X.
Yeah. I remember renting 7 and thinking it wasn't that great, but at the same time, it has that sort of nostalgia to it where you still kind of want to have it in your library anyway, just so you can play it anytime, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's that certain thing that comes with building a virtual console library and the feeling like you've got your whole childhood just in the form of little icons of their title screens at your fingertips on the touchscreen there with the Wii Remote pointer or something like that.
Oh, definitely. You just kind of say, what do I want to play today?
Exactly. You press a button and all of a sudden you're like 8, 9, or 10 again and just happy, you know? I think that's one of the best things about the Virtual Console, and it's nice to see some of these older developers that, even especially ones that have been struggling as of late, like Capcom, starting to really get serious about bringing out stuff that we didn't see before, aside from continuing to bring forward everything that had hit the Wii before, too.
Although, to be fair, if you looked at their E3 lineup, them bringing out stuff we've never seen before, probably does not ring true. Because I mean, their lineup was pitiful. It was like um,
Exactly.
it was Dead Rising, Monster Hunter, Ultra Street Fighter 4, and Ace Attorney. I mean, there really wasn't much.
Exactly. Yeah. Then I mean, when you get down to it, the big stars of it were effectively just the eShop stuff, the Virtual Console classics, of course, which at least are great to see coming again, and then Monster Hunter, of course.
Oh, definitely.
Indeed. I'm looking forward to Monster Hunter, particularly because of some of the really ridiculous stuff they've worked in there, like having multiple feline companions that run entire like tanks and ballistas alongside you in the battlefield. So where you had your little masked buddies in the previous game, like Cha-Cha, and the one they added in Ultima to, which I haven't picked up yet. But then this one gives you just a whole team of extra support buddies that are all just, cats will be meowing in the background and blasting the monster with a tank.
That's right.
Just that extra level of humor is great. On which note, too, I do hope that they follow this one up, since it should be a low-budget title enough anyway. I do hope they bring one of those Feline Village games to the 3DS next, too, given that they've got multiple Monster Hunter games on there now, and the Feline Village games are obviously relatively low-budget titles in the first place, and considering the sort of almost Animal Crossing-esque appeal to the sort of very cute anime-style, extra cartoony versions of the Felines that the Feline Village games had, I think that one would easily find a healthy market on the 3DS too.
Definitely.
Indeed. It would probably help to appeal to some people who don't get quite into the hardcore Monster Hunter stuff too, since I know you've had some difficulty quite getting into it yourself, and from what I've read, Feline Village is a lot easier to get into and a bit more straightforward.
Yeah, my problem with Monster Hunter was it's not for me. I've tried Monster Hunter, I've tried Monster Hunter Freedom, I've tried Monster Hunter 3, and every time after around 10 hours, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I've had enough.
Yeah, they're basically big grinding games, and I find that the best part of it, from essentially the fact that I was literally dragged into the series by friends from college who are hardcore fans of the series and who played it religiously for years and will just disappear into the game when a new one comes out. They basically dragged me into the game and said, "You're going to learn to play this with us." And it took me a while to get it to click and to get that sense of progression down, because I mean the lack of the traditional RPG elements definitely, and the fact that you're dealing with the sort of randomized nature of the monster loot that you're carving from their remains and such can make things kind of difficult. Plus you have to use wikis a lot of the time to figure out what the best combinations of equipment and weapons are and things like that for any given situation. But once you really start to get it down, you can get into at least 3 to 4 player online hunts, the game gets incredibly exciting and fun.
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, it's one that just while it can be fun in single player and like different bursts and all of that, I'm sure Ultimate will be when I get my hands on that, and the same with 4 too. But yeah, it's definitely a game though that is heavily dependent on the the multiplayer co-op experience in a way that few franchises really are.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Otherwise, it could be kind of like feeling like a Mario Party 10, but without another player to play as Bowser, ruining everything.
Oh man, that was just hilarious. Watching the Treehouse play Mario Party 10. I mean that's the only time I ever heard someone from Nintendo say, "My grandma plays better than you, and she's dead."
That's right. Yes, that was just a legendary joke moment there. And of course, Treehouse member, I believe Audrey Drake was just having fun sadistically having Bowser leap down on their little car full of the Mario Party characters.
Oh yeah, that was great.
That whole animation of Bowser just jumping into the air and crashing down on them is pretty much meme-worthy in itself, too.
It really was.
So the next Mario game is My Grandma's a Zombie?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Why-
Zombies are my grandma. That could be a future Double Fine production there, too. Try to pay homage to Zombies Ate My Neighbors and Ghoul Patrol.
Well, knowing that this would be Japan, it would be why my grandma can't be this cute.
That's right, my little grandma. It's full of an opening full of little shots of the grandma turning to the camera and looking coquettish with little sparkly eyes. Grandma.
Grandma, how did they make you look 12?
That's right.
But I'm really 400, so it's okay.
That's right. Every other joke is her taking a really long, meaningful sip from her mug of tea.
It would be Cologne the anime.
That's right.
And a really thoughtful peck at that banana.
Looking outside and watching as the sky clouds over and a single snowflake falls down. Winter is
That's
here.
right.
Something something popsicle.
That's right. Slow motion popsicle.
That's right.
Grandma, no!
So, anyway, what would you say is your
I think you
biggest
just
surprise?
described the next key visual arts title.
There it is, right there. Every character is an old person stuck in a young person's body, or vice versa.
Oh,
Everybody
God, yeah.
cries, everybody dies. Everything they do.
So, what would you say is the biggest surprise this week?
I'd have to say probably the biggest for me, at least, were the new IPs Nintendo had. Well, everything else was great, but Codename Steam and Splatoon were really fantastic.
Definitely. Splatoon just came out of nowhere. I mean, I don't think anyone expected Nintendo to do like this balls to the wall arena shooter with
Exactly.
adorable squid girls.
Yeah, and rather than sort of being your usual sort of typical generic gun-based game like you get in the West here, I mean, it's basically like a weird sort of classic Sega style. I mean, even the visuals remind me a lot of things like Jet Set Radio, but it feels like a wacky Japanese arcade game at heart in the best way too, which adds a certain level of freshness and replay value that you rarely see in genres like this.
Definitely. And I've actually heard some rumors that the creator of Squid Girl is thrilled with the concept and expressed some desire to have his characters appear in as like a DLC or something.
That would be amazing, and I'm sure Nintendo would probably try to make sure they could bring that kind of stuff here too. I mean, I would hope that it wouldn't be, if it was just the one guy's characters, too big of a licensing deal to be able to bring West.
Definitely.
We've definitely seen some things like that before here too, like in Bike Rider DX on the 3DS eShop. There's a whole bunch of Ram Rider tracks with their actual licensed music in it, and they actually managed to bring all of those licensed music tracks to the West with the game. And it looks like Bike Rider DX 2 has a bunch of Shinchan stages in Japan too, and there's a chance that we may see those actually make it over here too.
That's
Nice.
a pretty big deal getting the rights for that stuff.
Oh yeah, because that stuff
It tends
is
to be a nightmare.
Yep.
Yep, because it depends on who has not only distribution rights for the video, but whether the option for media um, and merchandise are up in the air. Because if they have the rights to the media and the video, but not the music, then you're going to have to go between two or three parties to get that stuff over. That's why
Yeah.
Tatsunoko versus Capcom was such a big deal when it came out, and why they never re-released it, because they only had. I mean, it was just such a bitch to get all those licenses together. Because
Exactly. And the thing is, Bike Rider DX2 is literally just a game about playing as a little stick man riding a bike against backgrounds trying to collect medals while the stages themselves are increasingly brutal to actually clear. So it's one of those sort of simplest of the simple little eShop games, and they're only $3 each, so... And yet we're getting licensed Japanese content in those games here.
this is kind of awesome.
Indeed, I still need to pick up the first. They've been teasing the release of the sequel just about any time now on Twitter for a while. I believe it's Cyberfront that's been doing the localizations of those, and I think they've been publishing them in Japan too. That or Spicy Soft. They're sort of some of the smaller publishers over there who I kind of get mixed up a little bit at times. But they do good stuff anyway, and it's just nice to see the kind of dedication we're getting on the eShops here in the West from Japanese developers and publishers too, given that they're actually being more reliable and eager to bring their stuff out everywhere than we're seeing with retail games as of late, as stupid as that hesitation and excuse-making has visibly been for some time now.
Yeah, I still remember during the height of E3, one of the biggest news stories that came out was Ubisoft. We're sitting on at least one title that we won't for Wii U that will not be released until there are more systems sold.
Yeah, meanwhile they're happy just dropping stuff out that won't make money on the other systems, and they completely ignore how bad the software sale is on the PS4 and Xbox One too.
Well, software sales across the board aren't exactly stellar.
Exactly, they're all struggling, but at the same time we do know that Wii U owners are actually dedicated to buying a hell of a lot more games than the other two are by contrast, even though they still could stand to get more. But most of that too is just a matter of continuing to increase the user base, and as we know now too, we are seeing the systems begin to sell out across the country after that E3 too.
Yeah, I actually went to 3 stores and Wii U was sold out in all 3, which was a good sign.
Yeah, that is pretty damn incredible. I'm looking forward to seeing how hard it is to find one when I get one this summer, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they manage to keep at least a few of those $200 refurbished ones in stock, since that's probably going to be what I end up going for.
That seems to be the best dirty secret of the internet right now. Um, it seems to be like one of these common things among the enthusiasts, but getting outside of that circle,
Exactly.
no one knows about it. So
Exactly, which is why I'm kind of hopeful that if I keep my fingers crossed, they'll keep enough of those in stock and be able to keep that deal going just long enough, at least, for me to get on board with one of those, because I'm planning on hopefully getting the system either in July or the earlier part of August at latest.
I think you will because a lot of that also is from the feedback I've seen, a lot of those quote unquote refurbished units are basically um retailer returns from unsold Nintendo Land bundles, and they had a
Oh, nice.
lot of those.
So, yeah, so they are basically just factory fresh then, essentially, just older units.
Right, so you'll just have to go through that like 4.5 hour update process mostly.
Yeah, I can deal with that. I mean, I'm sure we've probably got enough bandwidth, even though we have AT&T where I live. And of course, that's that wonderful thing we have going on in this country now too, where all of our ISPs are starting to throttle bandwidth in an era where people are trying to talk more and more about streaming everything and cloud computing and things like that, while the ISPs are just saying, "Nope, you're not going to do that."
Mm.
And then, of course, that even leads into, the realities of what killing net neutrality means for this country, too, in contrast to the rest of the world, unless we manage to successfully campaign to and save that somehow yet.
Well, cloud computing isn't at odds with net neutrality, or the anti-net neutrality, as it were. When it comes down to streaming, you don't need a lot of processing power for that. You just need bandwidth.
Yeah, yeah, and then that's where the ISPs want to charge us an arm and a leg, or just say, you know what? Nope, after a certain point.
Well, I mean, the whole issue is they've already charged us. We've paid for what we expect to get, and now they can turn around and charge all of the companies that want to give us the thing that we want.
Yeah, as they actually noted on the Daily Show not that long ago, or it might have been John Oliver's show, I forget which of the two. Where
Yeah,
something
Oliver had quite the tirade.
Yeah.
It was very funny.
Yes,
It
that was
was.
excellent. It was like, I think we're like, what, 24th, 25th in the world behind Estonia, and we're paying an insane amount of money compared to the rest of the world for lower quality internet.
Mm-hmm.
And yet here we are letting ISPs sue the government so they can fuck us over even more, when if anything, the public should be trying to mount a class action lawsuit against these ISPs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it depends on region too. I have a pretty stellar internet service here, but I do pay more for it than probably I would in other places in the world, so that's still an issue.
Yeah, we would like to pay less for what we pay here, and we have generally mostly stable internet service here, though we're also part of this Uverse package from AT&T where it manages our cable television, our phones, and our internet, so if any of those goes down, all of them go down at once, and it's still AT&T, but the overall quality and speed of the internet access we've had really hasn't gone up in the past decade at all.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the usual AT&T price structure.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm sure that there are plans available for the same price that you're paying now that would give you better service, and you just don't know about them.
It's possible. We have actually tried to research stuff to potentially try to shift over to a different cable and internet plan, but my older brother's at least research that he did as sort of our tech guy in the family basically yielded that we would have to pay even more if we wanted anything even better than what we have right now locally. And they are starting to push this sort of booster service here where they're promising slightly better quality internet and faster loading speeds and things like that, though I have no idea if there's more bandwidth coming with that or not. But even then, they expect to jack up your bill even more if you go for that.
Mm.
Yep.
I'm in a
That's
similar
what
boat.
happens when there's a monopoly
Yep.
or an effective one. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that's
there
what
are
they nailed on the Daily Show. And
there are technically one or two other choices that I could make, but they're simply not viable.
Mm-mm. Like me,
There is nothing other than Bright House that offers anywhere near the bandwidth that I need for smooth sailing.
Yeah, just like my situation. We have Verizon, we have Cox. While Cox is a decent service, in this area at
Don't
least,
lie, you hate them.
I do. In this area, they
Would you
go
say it
down.
sucks, Cox?
It sucks, Cox. In this area, they go down almost constantly. They're expensive. If I remember correctly, our internet bill at my old address was around $65 for one down, five up.
Mm.
So I mean,
Was that
and
fiber?
no, that's just cable.
One down,
Yeah.
five up? That's
Uh-huh.
unusual for cable. Usually it's the opposite.
I think we're still on DSL here too. Though we also
Or
have additional costs in our bills since we have HBO and NHK in our package too.
yeah, but I went to Verizon, got uh, a better package for much less, even though they are not exactly the best with customer service.
Mm. Well, it beats Comcast anyway, seeing as we've seen them sort of outright at the forefront of the whole "fuck you" customer movement, and I mean they were sort of the leaders in the whole anti-net neutrality thing.
Oh, definitely.
Although Verizon started it. Can't discount
Yeah,
that.
that's
well,
true too.
I shouldn't say Verizon started it. Verizon was the first to be successful.
There we go. It's like, hey, why provide a good service for our customers when we can fuck them over and make them pay us even more for it?
Yeah, well, and it's unfortunate that this falls on the FCC's doorstep because they've, as a public institution, they have had no credibility for a very long time.
Yep, I believe their current head now, that was recently named too, was I guess a lobbyist for one of these major ISPs too, who's basically there to kill net neutrality too. So there's big internet campaigns calling on the White House to basically fire him because he obviously has too big of a conflict of interest to have any business involved in any of this. But of course, as we also know, as they were pointing out on shows like John Oliver's, Obama is also known for being very cozy with all of these guys too, and spending no lack
Yeah.
of time at their houses too. So
It's how the revolving door works. It's how
Yep.
Tim Geithner wound up at Treasury, even though he is, you could argue that he was part of the problem.
exactly. And then he was one of those people that, like, alongside Ben Bernanke, everybody wanted Obama to get rid of as soon as he came in, and then he said, "Nah, we're gonna keep the Bush team," and it's just like, really?
We should on because
But I just want to say that Eric Holder and Gates at Defense were not bad choices to keep.
not at all.
I wish that Holder were more harsh and aggressive when it comes to corporations, because his Justice Department's just been giving every corporation slaps on the wrist over every little thing too. But I don't know exactly how feasible it is for them to legally crack down on them in the way that they should be.
Yeah, just given what Justice had been through in the Bush years, Holder, even if he did absolutely nothing, he's a better choice than what was there before.
He's not out there singing "Let the Eagle Soar," so we're spared that. And of course, John Ashcroft was also the one famous for covering up the breasts on that blind justice statue there too in the department, because he was bothered by a statue. Anyway, if we're gonna talk gaming some more, we should probably
Yeah.
also mention Yoshi's Woolly World, because yes,
I think that last comment brought me back to Mr. Show with Bob and David.
that too, yes. The little
was
Senator
the-
Tinkerbell and the
Tinkerbell, that was his name.
that's right, yes, and the little wooden
It's like,
doll that he
this-
found
This
very
little
titillating.
statue is it's titillating.
That's a great sketch.
Oh man,
And he was just dancing around.
That
while
was the
David
best
Cross's character
episode.
just sort of sang to it.
Jack
Yeah.
Black was in that episode. That was probably the best one that they ever did.
Oh yeah, that was the one with Jeepers Creepers, the musical, if I remember right. Singing about how he was on the 9th hole when he was playing like golf on the NES. I
No,
think
that was
season one,
the
so-
episode that it was about holes.
Ah yes, the Dick Milk Machine. That too. I think
Yes.
Jack Black was on at least 2 of them, but yes.
Oh, okay.
Do not put your willy into holes. They said.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Maybe we should put it along.
Don't put your dick in these holes.
That's right. Like
Don't
I
put your
said,
dick in these holes.
Yoshi's Woolly World.
These
Yes.
3 holes are not for thee.
The Milk Machine. Yes,
So-
but yeah.
So,
I
so
do have
let's,
Yoshi's Woolly World is basically Nintendo taking a look at what Sony's been trying to do with Little Big Planet since the very first game and saying, this is how you do it, make it look good, and make it fun.
It's amazing how much that game's evolved since it first came out too. Because I mean, if you remember, it was like this really primitive thing with like an outline of Yoshi and Yarn, and all the enemies were outlines.
Exactly. It was much more like Kirby's Epic Yarn, but where that Kirby's Epic Yarn mostly shirked traditional Kirby gameplay for something alternative, this is still clearly very much a traditional Yoshi game, but it's made out of yarn.
Definitely, and we also got a new Kirby game. We got Canvas Curse 2, which looks like claymation.
Yes, yeah, the Rainbow Curse. Yeah, it looks wonderful as well. I'm curious to see what they're going to do with the TV too, seeing as it's going to be all gamepad gameplay, and I would imagine they'd put something interesting on the TV screen too while you're looking at the gamepad too, and I'm curious to see just what that is.
I would not be shocked if they did like DK Crash Course and gave you a full course view of it.
That would be pretty great too, very handy. I'm also
Hmm.
really curious to see where they go with the Amiibo NFC figurines that they revealed there as well.
Those could be very good or very bad depending on how they're used. Cause
Exactly. Right now, at least the core concept is much, much bigger than anything we've seen in Skylanders and Disney Infinity, and they've made it pretty clear that it's all sort of additional value for everything that they plug into. But I can see them doing like eShop games and apps that are cheap to free that you could use those in as well, and things like that to sort of add to their value as well. But while at the same time, they're sort of additional features for your retail games from Smash to Mario Kart and all of these other games. They've already confirmed will use them.
yeah, definitely. And the figures look really nice. They're good. They're good quality like molding to them.
Exactly. It reminds me kind of like the Skylanders a little bit, but hopefully a little bit less expensive too. Given that, I mean, they were doing about $5 for the Pokemon Rumble U figurines, and while those are nice too, they're very small and very simplistic, and they don't quite. While they're nice, they don't compete in terms of quality with Amiibo or Skylanders or Disney Infinity or anything like that.
Definitely. But well, that's like comparing apples to oranges in some ways too, though.
Exactly. They're a little bit more like cheap gashapon toys that just happen to have a nice additional feature. And I mean, they do literally come in these little Pokeball capsules too. So you have a literal
Exactly.
capsule to keep them in like that. Whereas these are a little bit nicer by contrast, and it's nice too. Well, at the same time, you do get that kind of nice, like feeling you would get back in the 80s or 90s or even 70s, getting those little gachapon figurines out of those machines too, and collecting all those little toys they would have in them back then.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a nice concept to see brought back, and obviously, then since Nintendo's picked up on the success of what Activision and Disney have pulled off with those, they have such a huge, rich pool of characters, and they're already trying to obviously go a little bit more ambitious with having multiple games and apps and such use these figurines. There's just a tremendous amount of potential in that.
Yeah, there really is. The ones they've shown off are just fantastic. I mean, my wall's gonna be crying when they come out.
Exactly, same here. I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that with only a few Smash characters left, they finally confirm both Ness and Captain Falcon among the returning ones, because I want figurines of them for multiple games too.
Hmm.
Man, my wallet cries for the wrong reasons. It cries because I'm paying loans off.
Well, that it cries for those reasons too. But
I get to be the asshole and say that I don't have any loans that I'm paying off, and actually people are in debt to me right now, so even though I'm technically
How does that
divorced.
feel? I also have that.
Yeah, of course. Then at the same time, I'm also too poor to support myself and live on my own at this point. So there is that
Hmm.
too.
yeah, double-edged
Yeah.
sword there, my friend.
Exactly. I don't even have insurance, so
It's bad having debt. It's also bad being a creditor to somebody who's unreliable.
yeah. I've sort of been waiting for it to get fully paid back for quite a while now, but I just kind of have to deal with it basically.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, imagine working for 6 months and not getting paid for it.
Yeah, that's not fun.
Not at all.
Fossil Fighters Frontier. In that 3DS game, also previously mentioned in this podcast, you get to revive dinosaurs from their fossils and then drive around in a buggy that you get to outfit yourself and then shoot them while having your dinosaur do most of the fighting for you. It's
Ah,
a
Game Freak.
dinosaur truck RPG.
Mm.
That's
Driving
awesome.
around in my dinosaur truck.
Hunting and killing.
I just want to
Running.
say on the air, as it were, that I want to get a Wii U, but I just don't have a reason yet.
Hyrule Warriors, September.
Yes,
So good.
September is my first reason. That's what I
Yeah.
was getting at.
And they have confirmed, too, that they are going to be splitting the cast evenly by gender for the first time in the series, too. Of course, we've only seen Link as the sole male character so far, totally outnumbered by the female characters. But there's
Well,
still room for a bunch of other male characters, and that said, fingers crossed for Tingle.
I mean, Koei games have been pretty even in terms of, well, Chinese even.
Yeah, I've been playing Samurai Warriors 3
It's
and
like-
Chronicles a bit more again lately, and I mean, the men still outnumber the women by a good bit, but they've been trying to even that out with every sequel, and I'm hoping we'll see some more of that on the Wii U soon enough, too, because
Yeah,
when they were
it's
talking
just
about...
the history. I mean, the problem is that the problem is that they're portraying history, right?
Yeah, there's only so many figures you
It's
can
like
get in there.
in Samurai Warriors, the girls are pretty much a kunoichi or just somebody protecting somebody's offspring, right?
Yeah, or you get somebody like Okuni, or you get people who are just kind of stretched to be brought in there too. But it was also noted
Yeah.
too that
Well,
when they were,
Okuni was kind of a ninja chick too, right?
no, she was the one with the umbrella actually, who mostly hung out at the hot springs.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh right,
Everybody would be
Kunoichi was the ninja chick. That would make
Yes.
more
Yeah.
sense.
Kunoichi and Nene, and I mean Kunoichi.
But
was
it's kind of
basically
like it's kind of like a derogatory name, right?
That's basically
She-
female ninja. I mean, she was the distillation of something like 7 or so bodyguards that Yukimura Sanada had.
Yeah, isn't traditionally isn't kunoichi traditionally a term meaning pretty much you know, girl in a ninja clan, but not really a ninja herself?
I'm not 100% sure of the etymology, so I can't confirm actually. But yeah, what I was also happy to hear about though too is that when they were talking about Hyrule Warriors during the big digital event too, they were also saying that they hoped that the game would help get fans of that game in particular into the rest of this Musou series, since it's been flagging, of course, in recent years, and it's practically dead on Sony systems in terms of sales now. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this is a good sign of as their partnerships continue with increasing with Nintendo, as much as Tecmo Koei's been doubling down on that lately, that we'll finally start to see more traditional main series Musou games on there, like maybe the definitive version of Samurai Warriors 4 when that's ready, and whatever the next mainline Dynasty Warriors is, and things like that.
Yeah,
I'd love to
I
see
think
some
I think a
One
lot of
Piece
people just
Gundam
don't
stuff.
understand or don't know how fun the Three Kingdoms games are.
Exactly. They often get sort of written off, even by the
Well, and the
gaming
history
media,
is also something that most people don't really identify with, and that makes sense. But those
Exactly.
games are a lot of fun, and I'm definitely excited to see that happen with Zelda characters.
Yeah, the gameplay is what won me over at an amazement way back, like around a decade ago, when I just happened to play the third one at one of those amazements back then. I was amazed by how much it felt basically like those old classic arcade-style brawlers like Streets of Rage and such, but in 3D and with character-building RPG elements and an insane number of characters to play as, and essentially getting into that sort of gameplay experience acted as my conduit into getting interested in the characters and the figures and the history there too.
Yeah, I must admit I'm kind of a latecomer to the whole Warriors series. Like I actually got started with Samurai Warriors 3 on the Wii.
Yeah, it's a
And
good
well-
one, but at the same time, kind of hard to wade into if you're not used to the sort of different flow Samurai Warriors has in contrast to Dynasty Warriors.
Yeah,
I would think that you would really. I would think that you would kind of step right into that in the sense because you're big on fighting games, right? So
Yep.
in a sense, there's a lot of similarities there. There's
Yeah, I mean, they're
maybe
cousin
not.
genres, like the brawlers were back on the old days in the arcades, too.
I mean, you are right. It does have a lot in common with, like, say, Tekken or Virtua Fighter, because you do have, like, the elements like the dial combos. You do have those special moves, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's not as complicated, but it's
Nah,
definitely
it's-
some similarities.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just like just like Streets of Rage and Final Fight were kind of like cousins to Street Fighter back in the day.
Absolutely.
They complement each other damn well. And I think we've just nailed just about the hour now, too.
Yeah, so I guess one last topic. What would you say was your game of the show this year?
That's a very, very tough choice. Probably Xenoblade Chronicles X by default, just because I'm so excited for that. But runners up are definitely the new Legend of Zelda, even though we haven't seen full gameplay yet. But just the render they've done within the game itself, using that engine, looks absolutely amazing. And I'm also very excited for Codename Steam too, since it's a completely new strategy RPG IP by the people behind Fire Emblem and Advance Wars. And Splatoon, of course, is a wonderful surprise too.
Mm.
Hyrule Warriors is one I'm excited for, so it's a tough pick because there's so many there. I mean, I want to play basically everything that was there.
I would like to say Xeno, but the amount of time that we have to wait is just kind of ridiculous. It's so far off that we even get to talk about this again that I almost don't want to say that. So I'm going to say the Theater Rhythm curtain call.
All I can say though is that 40-minute stream they did on Xeno. Holy crap!
Oh my god, that was amazing.
They blow up the Earth in the first 5 minutes of the game too.
Yeah, seems like the right thing to do.
Exactly.
Pretty much have to destroy the world until Japan becomes the only relevant nation.
That's right. The game begins with the Earth blowing up and ends with Nopon. Anyway, on to Mike.
And I'd say mine was definitely a toss up as well because there was just so much cool stuff shown. But my favorites it would have to be a toss up between either Xenoblade or Splatoon. I mean, I went into this like I saw that trailer for Splatoon. I'm like, could be interesting. But then as I watched the Treehouse streams, it's like as I saw more and more of it, I just kept saying, this looks really cool. This looks like something I would really have a lot of fun playing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big shooter fan myself, but it really does feel like sort of a classic, wacky Sega-style arcade game in a very, very good way. And I mean, it feels like more of a delivery on that promise we sort of had at launch with the likes of Tank 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 getting its only a console release, which I mean seems like a fun game, but heavily repetitive and more reliant on a party environment than single player too. But this looks like it's going to essentially have that sort of addictiveness, but on a whole new level, and is a much, much better game.
Definitely.
I'm also looking forward to, for all the complaints it's getting, Sonic Boom, because that looks like a lot of fun too, and I'm excited to see what else Sega's got to show too, because they've still got a bunch of Nintendo games that they've confirmed are exclusives, but they haven't revealed yet.
Well, Sonic Boom, I was interested until we went to E3. Then I started seeing seeing like the live gameplays, the impressions, and it just kind of turned me off in a lot of ways. It looks like they're rushing it to get it out for the fall.
Well, I'll wait and see how it turns out when it's finalized, at least. But we've still got at least another good 4 or 5 months right now.
True.
That's sort of the difficulty of showing games that aren't quite ready to be released, like people who are scrambling to complain about the new Star Fox, when what we saw was basically a prototype of what will be a complete game in a year.
Yeah.
True.
Not quite ready is not a year to me.
Exactly,
Like,
yeah.
Concept is a year.
Indeed, indeed. And of course, we saw a lot of concepts with the others at E3 this year that aren't going to even be anywhere 2 years from now at the rate they're going. Looking at things like how EA made a big deal out of Star Wars Battlefront last year and then had part of a, I guess, clip of an engine they built for it in a year, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
This was like the E3 of, outside of Nintendo, the ghosts of games. Theoretical games, that might be, but a lot of it will probably turn into vaporware, the way things are going.
Like Mass Effect, where the only thing they had was a picture of a tree.
Exactly. That was amazing in itself. Oh, man.
I think that's why one reason why this gen is suffering in general. It's like who wants to build a new engine for everything that the company does every few years? It doesn't make them money.
And then, of course, what the PS4 and Xbox One are essentially are just slightly prettier versions of last generation, and customers aren't very happy about that either because they got sick of what last gen was fast.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm sure it took thousands of man hours to make something that was just a little bit prettier than last gen.
Yeah,
I wouldn't doubt it. Budgets are ballooning by an exponential rate.
exactly. We're basically just watching the industry outside of Nintendo crash itself, while the PC gaming scene is like, indie games over here, bitches.
And Nintendo just saying, all right, we're just going to be doing our own thing. We'll buy up some exclusives that look nice, but have fun, buckos.
Exactly, and that's
Uh,
why they deserve to lead in the console and portable market at this point now too, because they're going to be the only ones left at the rate things are going.
although the only thing
They've
I'd like
always had the lead in the portable market. Let's be
Oh yeah,
honest.
that's true too. Yeah,
Al- Although the only thing I would like to see is I'd like to see them go and do sports games because that's the only thing they're really like gigantically lacking in at this point.
exactly. I would
Uh,
definitely support that, even though I wouldn't buy most of them. Though I'm mostly
mm,
just still keeping my fingers crossed for the day the next sort of Wii Ski / Go Vacation game gets revealed, because those games were so ridiculously underrated on the Wii in every way, and those are the kinds of sort of sports games I like, basically.
Yeah,
well,
I don't see them getting seriously into sports games pretty much ever, because then you're dealing with players unions, and people want to see the names of their heroes on the game and all
mm,
kinds of silly crap like that.
It's a Wheaties box.
the only problem is if it doesn't have a license, it doesn't sell. So,
The Mario sports games do well, but then again, those are
Well,
sort
it
they're a
doesn't sell
different
as
approach,
much,
too.
but I think it still sells enough. It just
well,
depends. I
it
mean,
depends on.
if you're paying millions of dollars and only making millions plus one back, then was it worth it?
No, but the thing that what I'm getting at is the problem is if it doesn't have a license, it does not sell with sports games
Yeah,
because
and that's why they'll
um
never do it. I mean, that's why
because
that's why they'll never get into that market.
It'll be interesting to
which
see what
is
the future for that is too, given that the segment of the market that's focused on is completely collapsing right now too.
yeah. I mean, it is a shame because of that because going back to the NES Super NES days, we had some really cool stuff. Like we had a lot of those unlicensed sports games like Baseball Stars
Yeah,
or
I was
Double
gonna say
Dribble. I mean,
we
It's
had a
right.
lot of games
but
that were not encumbered by players union licenses.
right,
I like the
but
idea of them doing knockoff games where they take real players' names
mm,
but change a few letters, so it's suddenly not King Griffey Jr.'s baseball, but Min Smithy Jr.'s baseball.
yeah, but
That's a
yeah.
time-honored tradition in Japanese stuff, that's for
He's
sure.
got an
Oh
extra
yeah.
mustache on his forehead, so he's totally not the same guy.
Yeah, it's like Pepsi except for the S's and H,
Papsy.
or Pepsi. Yeah, yeah, got to change it up between shows, otherwise the show might claim something.
That's right. I still
Exactly.
remember, amazingly too, I still have those old Megazone OVAs too from the 80s, back before they had to change a lot of their brand names. And they made a really, really big deal out of in the second part, which was insanely gory and hard to watch. Just the fact that they had Budweiser and McDonald's in the
Mm.
animated film itself. So they would keep cutting around and they would have characters just take a swig of beer while casually remarking, ah, Budweiser. Shit like that.
Well, I have a lot of shows like that myself. Like I'm trying to think. I'm not sure if it wasn't Cobra, but it was something around the same period. It might have been a
Yeah,
Hard Lock where one of the
that
characters
was
was
the era.
a big fan of Wild Turkey.
That's amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was a Trigun thing. Wild turkeys all over the place in that show.
That's right.
There was an older show like that where it might not have
Yeah.
been Wild Turkey. It was like this really specific brand now.
Yeah, I think Trigun had the actual brand name.
They probably paid for that license
Yeah.
pretty heavily.
Vegas.
Now,
Do Anime Maker's Marquez with animated versions of Mary Madeline and James Carville, making us not want to drink their alcohol ever.
I think now's a good time to kind of cut things off.
Yeah.
So, thanks for joining us, everyone. I hope you guys had fun listening to us as we had a good time talking.
I'm Party On Wayne.
Party on, Garth.
Aw, I was gonna say I'm Party on Garth. You
ruined
asshole,
now.
you ruined it.
I am a dickhead.
Let's just leave it at that.
And this is AHN.
That's right. Wait, that was the NBC logo. Oh well.